So if you clicked on this video, I'm going to assume you're looking for realistic advice to land your first computer science job. So who am I and why should you be listening to me in the first place? Well, I'm going to list off some of my credentials. Recently, I graduated summa cum laude from UF in December. I was also an involved member of the student body. I'm also an incoming software engineer at Datadog, but I've also worked at Warner Bros. Discovery and at the Air Force Research Laboratory in Rome, New York. Above all else, I'm a first-gen student and community college transfer, so I've had to learn a lot of things the hard way. This video is going to serve for me to share about 5 years worth of knowledge and experience to all the viewers out there. One big thing that I've noticed as well is that a lot of the biggest creators are giving advice from their experiences, but their experiences are from a job market that no longer exists, right? People that might have graduated in 2021 or 2022 when there was that COVID hiring spree. So the job market looks completely different now, and with oversaturation of CS and also the rise of AI, the competition for an entry-level job is only getting more and more intense. So without further ado, my first piece of advice would be to get involved, right? Do research. When you do research, it'll likely be your first paid role doing anything computer science related, which is huge because you can use that as leverage for your first internship, which is going to be the hardest milestone in your entire undergraduate career, right? Or at least one of the hardest. The biggest thing is that you're going to get paid to work on really cool projects from people that know a lot more than you at this point in your career. Unless you're some kind of super genius, you're going to be learning from people that have dedicated their lives to this kind of work. So it's obviously a great experience. The only drawback though is it's probably going to be a sizable time commitment, right? It's probably going to be somewhere around 10 to 15 hours a week. And if you're not really too big into research or don't want to go into academia, it might not be the best option for you. But if you're a freshman or sophomore with a bit of extra time to spare, right, I don't see what the harm could be, especially since, as I said before, this can be used as leverage to land your first role. One big piece of advice that I would give relating to research is that ahead of time, you can go to your school's directory and actually look through all of the faculty in the computer science department and see what they're working on, right? And then start reaching out to them. Email them, let them know that you're interested in the work that they're doing and see if there's any positions open for you. If you're interested in VR, AI, blockchain, look for professors that are working on those things. They're working on things all the time. It doesn't matter what the niche is. Just reach out to them. Another thing is going to be clubs. This is the cheat code to success early on in your career. You're going to be surrounded by like-minded, motivated individuals, which is extremely important at this point in your career. Chances are when you end up in these clubs, you're going to be around people that have the same goals or have even been in positions that you want to be in. People that have worked at your dream job, people that have worked at Google, at Netflix, and there's a lot of things that you can learn from them. A lot of the things that I've learned computer science-wise before I actually landed my first role came from clubs. I learned a lot of things about GitHub and version control and things like that, and just how to work in a team as a whole. Being in a club is extremely valuable. So some recommendations that I have for clubs are SHEP, Wixie, ColorStack, any sort of software engineering club or a UI UX design club. A lot of these are going to have very good opportunities to network, but also to work on pretty cool projects, as I mentioned before, which is very important and leads me to my next point. Do side projects, right? Do things that actually interest you. Before I landed my first role, I had done about 10 plus projects. I made games in Lua, C#, Unity. I made full stack applications. I did just about anything that I could get my hands on. And there's a ton of resources online. And at the time, I didn't even have ChatGPT to use as leverage. It wasn't until later, but still, now you can use that to your advantage to build out things that, you know, wouldn't have been possible 2 or 3 years ago. Make sure that you're experimenting frequently with different frameworks, coding languages, etc. Once you kind of land your first job, you're most likely going to be working in a specific language. So this is the opportunity to kind of learn everything and just kind of put things on your resume. One thing that I'm going to recommend that might be a little controversial is that it's probably best if you have a high GPA, right? Mainly just because it could be the differentiating factor between you and another applicant. If you have similar extracurricular involvement and have taken just about the same classes, the thing that's going to set you apart, aside from maybe the school that you go to, is going to be your GPA. So if you have a high GPA, it's going to help you stand out. Not necessarily because it's indicative of intelligence or anything like that, but it does reflect work ethic to some extent. So it's best to have it as high as possible. I would say to aim for about the 3.75 mark. I think that would be ideal, at least for this job market. Now, for the bread and butter, the recruiting cycle. Don't be afraid to fail. Fail often. Fail as often as you possibly can. I'm probably gonna make a separate video where I talk about one of the biggest failures that I've ever experienced in my entire life. And it was because of a fear of failure. I let a fear of failure stop me from achieving something that was completely possible. And I just chose to not go through with it out of pure fear. And to add to that, another huge piece of advice is that you will never feel ready. It doesn't matter how much that you've prepared for this particular task, whether it be an online assessment, an interview, a final, it doesn't matter. You will never feel ready enough for it. With that being said, make sure that you're failing as often as possible. At the end of the day, it's luck-based to some degree. Someone could get the same online assessment as you, and their questions could be easier than yours, or vice versa. It's just a numbers game, so the more that you apply and the more that you put yourself out there, the better your chances will be. The second thing I'm gonna recommend is make sure that you stay on top of the most recent job postings. When I first started, I was just doing some crazy stuff, just going on LinkedIn, applying to anything that I could, and I never heard back because it wasn't really like a targeted approach. I didn't know what the method was, but my recommendation would be to visit the Simplify Summer 2026 internship page and just try and apply to as many of those as you can, right? 3 to 5 a day. And they also have the same thing for full-time roles, and they release it, you know, on a year-to-year basis. Definitely stay on top of that. Apply through them, apply through the company's portal. Don't do the LinkedIn easy apply. I never really had any success from that. Another thing to keep in mind, go to career fairs, right? One that I'm gonna mention is the SHEP conference. It's hosted annually and it's geared towards Latino and Latina students. I know 2 people personally that managed to get full-time roles just from this conference alone. The next thing is gonna be, if you joined ColorStack, as I mentioned before, they host another annual summit online called the ColorStack Stacked Up Summit, where a bunch of recruiters go on, and it's virtual, completely free. I think it's honestly great. They give you a specific link to apply to the specific role of your choice when they open up, which is awesome. You kind of are like a distinguished applicant because you're applying through ColorStack. And the next thing is your school's career fair. I know someone that was able to get their first internship here, which they then leveraged to get an even better job later. I never had too much success at career fairs, but even if nothing comes out of them, I firmly believe in the law of attraction. So the more that you pursue something and the more that you chase after something with intent, the more likely you will be to receive it. So just put yourself out there. And like I said before, be willing to fail and fail consistently. Another thing is the big bad of the entire recruiting journey, which is LeetCode and the technical interview process. Before you even get to do a LeetCode problem, which is gonna be too difficult for you in the beginning, I would actually recommend another website called CodingBat. And I would just go through every single one of the Python problems that they have there, just because it's like the least verbose. So you have less of a likelihood to screw up when you're coding in front of another engineer. So it's a lot easier to remember the syntax and kind of like little tricks that will make it easier. So you don't have to worry about like pointer logic and stuff like that. So it makes it pretty simple. Study all of these CodingBat problems. If you're just starting out in your computer science career, let's say freshman or sophomore, this is going to be an amazing resource, mainly because it's going to teach you some of the fundamentals that you're going to use not only in LeetCode, but in the entire rest of your undergraduate career. So you may even see an increase in performance at school just from doing these like exercises. I personally have done these in both Java and Python. It's honestly a great tool that I don't see a lot of people talking about. The next thing is learn all the data structures, right? Get comfortable with their operations, with the time complexities, space complexity. All of these things are super important. You have to understand how these things work under the hood, because when it comes time to actually implement them in an interview setting, you're probably not going to know how to do it if you don't understand how they work, at least to some degree. I would even take it a step further and say, if you have the time to try and implement these data structures in the programming language of your choice. That's going to bring me to my next point. Learn BFS and DFS. It's an extremely powerful tool, whether it be matrix problems, graph problems, tree problems. BFS and DFS is honestly a cheat code. There's a saying that if you don't know how to solve the interview problem, it's most likely either hash map or BFS and DFS. My thing would be to try and learn how to do them by hand. If I gave you a tree, would you be able to go through the nodes in the breadth first search order, in order, pre-order, post-order traversals? If not, chances are you probably don't understand it that well, which is gonna reflect in your interview performances. Another thing is, obviously this has been run to the ground. Please do the blind 75. Even if you don't understand it that well your first pass around, do your best to try and soak up as much of the information as you can. A lot of people will tell you to try and wrestle with the problem for a little bit, which is good. But when you're first starting out, you're not going to know how to solve the LeetCode problem. So just look at the solution if you have to and try and work backwards from there. The second time that you see it, right, with some sort of space repetition framework, you'll start getting the hang of it and you could start applying it to more and more problems. You'll see that the reason that these 75 problems were curated was because they applied to such a large range of problems. The next thing I'm going to recommend for interview prep is actually going to be another YouTube video and a pattern recognition guide that is referenced in the video. It basically just gives you a framework to kind of break down problems, which is very, very good for learning, especially when you're starting out. Once you kind of start identifying the patterns of like this keyword kind of corresponds to this problem, or these constraints are kind of reflective of a problem or solution that would run in O of n squared time or O of n time, those will help you get better at solving these types of LeetCode problems. The next thing I'm going to say that might be a little controversial is buy LeetCode Premium, right? It is a little expensive, so if you don't have the money to dish for it, it's completely fine, but you're paying $179 for the entire year. If you manage to land a software engineering job that pays 100K, the return on investment is literally ridiculous. With LeetCode Premium, you get access to specific question banks from the companies. And obviously there are methods to get around this. There are like sites that kind of give you these questions for free, but they might not always be up to date. So you might be studying antiquated material. So your best bet would just be to spend the $179 if you have the money, all right? So don't sleep on LeetCode Premium. One last thing, do not overly rely on AI when starting out. When you're learning the fundamentals, it's very important that you try and ingrain those into your mind as much as possible, or the rest of your undergraduate career is going to be very, very difficult. When it comes time to kind of perform on the spot, you're not going to know how to because your fundamentals and your basis is shaky. Now, one very important thing is selling yourself. The most important thing that you'll ever have to sell in your life is yourself. For your resume, make sure that you follow this template. Doesn't matter if you use Google Docs or LaTeX, just follow this template. Don't make it flashy. Don't include photos of yourself. Don't include any sort of wacky fonts. Just keep it as simple as possible. And I'll even take it a step further. If you want to include some of your projects, make sure that they're hyperlinked so that people can actually see the work that you've done, whether it be to the GitHub page to that project, or if it's actually hosted live for recruiters or interviewers to see. An underrated tip that a lot of people don't talk about is make sure your GitHub is presentable. Don't leave it looking barren with no profile picture. None of your projects have readmes. Nobody knows what anything does. There are a lot of really cool examples of GitHub readmes that make your page look a lot more presentable. At the end of the day, you are trying to sell yourself as an engineer, as a programmer to these recruiters, to these companies. Lastly, LinkedIn. I can't stress how important your public images. So make sure that your LinkedIn is in top shape. Look at high achievers in your university or in similar schools and see how they have their things structured. People that are a few years above you or have already gone through those experiences, look at them and model your LinkedIn after them. There's a reason that these people are successful. Another thing is I would aim to have 500 plus connections so that there's a higher likelihood that recruiters and stuff will reach out to you for opportunities. The last thing is try and secure a return offer, right? Once you get that first role, it's going to be the easiest way to secure a job, mainly because you're in this company system for 10 to 12 weeks. You already have your foot in the door. And not only that, you have the most control over your performance than anything else. There are going to be a ton of things throughout the entire recruiting cycle that's going to be completely out of your control. So make sure that you show up every day and do your absolute best. I might make a separate video talking about how I managed to get a return offer from both the software engineering internships that I entered at. But again, that's for another video. And again, even if you get a return offer from somewhere that's not your dream job, it doesn't matter because you could still leverage that to land your dream role. So with all that being said, thank you for watching and let's land that first role.